Good morning and welcome back. You're watching Breakfast Television. We continue to follow updates from Buffalo this morning. The community mourning after a racially motivated mass shooting taking the lives of 10 people. CNN's Gloria Pazmino joining us live now from Buffalo. And Gloria, you are standing right by the scene of the shooting. Tell me, what is the feel like this morning?
That's right, Melanie. I mean, this is certainly a community that is in mourning, as you say. It's a community that's heartbroken, and it's a community that has been trying to come together since yesterday, when everybody started coming in here to talk to each other, to come together, to try to provide some sense of comfort. This is also a community that is in shock and that's traumatized by what's happened here over the weekend. 10 people lost their lives, and officials are saying that the man who drove here and opened fire inside that supermarket was motivated by racial hate. The community of the east side of Buffalo is primarily made up of African Americans, and we know that a majority of the victims were black. So a community that is grappling with the reality that they were targeted because of the color of their skin.
Gloria, let's talk about the victims here, learning a lot more about them, one of them being a former police officer.
Yes, we're learning more about the victims this morning. We're learning about that police officer, as you mentioned, who was working as a security guard inside the supermarket. He was a retired lieutenant from the Buffalo Police Department. In fact, he tried to engage the shooter. He had a concealed weapon on him to try to stop him. He was unable to do so. We're also learning about the ages of the victim. The youngest was 32. The oldest was 86 years old. One of the victims was a local church deacon who was at the store because he would provide transportation for people who couldn't drive here or who didn't have the means to get around. We learned about a substitute teacher who her family described as the pillar of a community. You know, so many lives affected by this today, and people waking up without their loved ones, having to face the reality that they're no longer here and that their lives were cut short in this tragically violent and hateful way.
Gloria, when we hear stories like this, of course, we want to focus on the victims, and thank you for bringing those stories and those identities and their backgrounds to our viewers. I appreciate it. But of course, the other question is, what happened? When we learn more about the suspect and this manifesto, what do we know?
Yeah, we've been learning about that since Saturday. We know that law enforcement officials have evidence that they believe points to the racially charged motivations the shooter had to come here. I do want to point out that he was not from this community. In fact, he drove from about 3.5 hours away from here, and he had written in that manifesto, as you mentioned, about his desire to hurt people of color. He wrote about this perception that the white race was being, quote unquote, replaced by people of color. He expressed his desire to commit violence, and he wrote at length about exactly what he wanted to come here and do on Saturday. And then he came here and he was wearing military-style gear, including a helmet that had a camera on it. He used that to live stream the entire shooting on the internet. And this is clearly a person who had a plan, who had thought about it for a long time, and it is part of the evidence that law enforcement is now combing through. That person, the shooter, is in custody. He has been charged with murder in the first degree, and we do expect him to appear in court this week once again.
Gloria, do you know anything about access to that weapon? You mentioned he was in sort of military gear, wearing that helmet. He had an assault-style gun. How did he get all of that?
Yeah, this is all going to be part of what we learn as this investigation unfolds. But we do know, law enforcement sources confirmed to us, that the gun he used was legally obtained here in the state of New York. What's in question is how he modified that gun in order to use it in this horrific way, which he did. There's a question about whether or not the magazine that had been attached to modify that gun was legally obtained. As far as the actual weapon, we do know that he obtained it legally here in the state of New York. We also know that there had been some red flags about this person. There were some questions about whether or not he was struggling with issues of mental health. He had been flagged by officials in his school. So certainly this is going to be part of what law enforcement is going to have to answer over the next couple of days, and what public officials are going to have to also be responding to, whether or not there is enough gun control, not just here in New York, but really we know that this is an issue across the entire country as we see, unfortunately, more and more of these mass shootings. So far, this shooting that took place here on Saturday is the deadliest in the country so far this year.
CNN's Gloria Pazmino joining us live from Buffalo this morning. Thank you so much.